You're listening to SMUBE Campus Radio Say What You Wanna Say. My name is Roshni Idnani, your host for this episode, and welcome to A Cuppa With, an alumni-giving podcast series where we'll be hosting special guest alumni for an informal coffee chat. These conversations will take you through their life journey, their careers, what success means to them, as well as touch on diverse perspectives on creating meaningful impact through their work, projects, or life. Today we're honored to have Flo Yeow here with us. Holding a dual portfolio of being the Google Philippines country lead, as well as taking care of customer solutions matters at Google, Flo has been in the big tech industry for over 5 years. But before any of that, he was a student at SMU's business school. This is A Cuppa with Flo Yeow. Welcome, Flo. It's so nice to have you here. What do you miss most about being an SMU student?
Hey Roshni, nice to meet everyone. What do I miss the most? Honestly, is the fact that you don't really have to think about work or anything at all. I know it sounds a bit far-fetched right now, but whatever all the students are thinking of right now, there are bigger problems to be looked into later on. So that's really what I miss the most, honestly.
Okay, I'll be taking notes because I'm in that boat right now, a student. And speaking of being a student, just last year you joined us here at SMU teaching as a guest lecturer. And for those of you who don't know, Flo is teaching a module called Sales and Marketing in the 21st Century. So how does it feel to be back here teaching at your alma mater?
I think it's lovely because to a large extent, coming back to SMU has always a very good feeling, especially when you see it evolving and changing, and to be able to come back into the SR, walk into the SR and deliver a lecture, I think it's really very heartfelt and it brings back a lot of memories, really.
So let's trail back to when you graduated from SMU, and you were picking a company to join to kickstart your career. What led you to apply for a position at Google out of all companies?
Honestly though, it wasn't that I chose Google, to be very frank, right? I did 30-something applications in internship, that's year 3, summer, and I did like 50-something applications to 70-something applications for full-time career. And you really just have to go through the mill. You go through all the interviews, you fail a lot. I had like 100 plus interviews before I finally landed on Google. And to a large extent, it's very much based off all the experiences, all the failures, all the interviews that you go through that led me to really that door that opened in Google and really being able to quote unquote nail it, right? So, and that's really just the start of everything, because you can get into Google, but I always tell everybody this, right, that getting to Google is one thing, but progressing within is another. And I think that's really where, in terms of whether I chose Google or otherwise, no, not really. I just really opened the net wide and far, and eventually Google landed, based off, of course, the marrying of expectations between the employer and employee.
Yeah, so that brings me to like the must-ask question, right? What is it like to work at Google? Tell us about your typical work day in your life at Google.
I don't think I ever have a typical work day, honestly. But if I were to keep it concise and logically go through it once again, I would start my day really with coffee. Right? That keeps me going when I wake up in the morning and before I start work, that I get myself pumped up. Subsequently, it's making sure that every client is well taken care of. Right, a huge part of it actually goes into internal meetings, and a lot of it goes into strategic thinking. Right, a lot of times you probably would have heard this before, but 80-20 rule. Right, people will tell you 80% of the time you spend on your core work and 20% of the time you spend doing something else that's your passion or something you're trying to do with your projects and so on and so forth. I personally try to invert it. Right, so I spend 20% of the time working on my clients and 80% of the time really pushing the thought and the processes and the workflows of whatever we are doing internally and externally to really fixing whatever we need to fix, to really driving for business success. And I think that's something that if you ask the rest of the Googlers or just working professionals, it's something that I'm a very big contrarian against.
Yeah, so as a business student myself, I'm quite curious how your SMU education influenced your decision to work in Google.
In full transparency, it's the pedagogy that SMU has that really still resonates with me today, right? In terms of content, in terms of the classes you pick, in terms of how you went through it, that is debatable, right? Some people, they'll pick the easiest to score modules and score straight A's, but do you really learn anything? I don't know, right? But for me, towards the tail end of my education, actually took a step to take classes where I don't go in with a group project. Right, I went in, I looked around, I screened the class, and I found a group project on the first day when I entered class. Right, it's to many, it's like, what the hell you're doing kind of a approach, but to me, I think it was really the risk that I took to going into class and finding someone that you think is like-minded and following through it. So it's really that soft side of SMU that really I brought through to the working world.
So now we've learned a bit about your life journey, Flo, and I'm sure that climbing up the corporate ladder mustn't have been an easy one, especially in an industry that's so competitive like big tech. So we often only see the glamour side of working at Google, like, the amazing pantry, the napping pods. But I want to know, what are some challenges that you faced in your career so far at Google?
As with many large organizations, I think one of the many challenges you probably face is really the processes, right? The second one really is navigating through the mess and ambiguity. And the third one really is how do you thrive and win in the midst of all of these things, right? The first one, if you go back to the processes, I think as with any large organizations, not just Google, but any large organizations, you need to be able to understand how the processes are being decided on. You need to understand why the processes are there in the first place. You need to understand the kind of complexities that comes with it, right? And really understand the why and the hows behind it, so that you get a perspective of why the process is there in the first place. That helps you understand not just a frustration point, but really diffuse that. The second one is really the ambiguity. Things change so quickly these days, especially with tech, not just with Google once again, but with any tech companies out there, right? Whether it's content, whether it's privacy, whether it's scaling up the business, whatever it is. And you need to be ready for that. And that's kind of where the logic and the structure comes in, because every day is a new problem that you need to look into, that you need to solve for. So are you ready for that, right? So thriving and going in the gray zones, if you ask me. Don't make a bad ethical decision, of course. Follow your value system, of course. But once you do that, how do you navigate through the ambiguity becomes the second thing. And lastly, really the thriving of it, right? Really being so comfortable, so cozy, and all the changes that are happening on a day-to-day basis, whether it's a strategy change down to an ops change, down to a process change, down to a regulatory change. If the person that actually thrives or win in this environment ultimately will be the one that wins.
Thank you so much, Flo, for sharing the struggles that you faced in your career. So it's only natural for me to ask, how did you overcome these challenges and face them?
I think if you ask me, it's really having that two things. One, growth mindset, and two, the curiosity, the hunger for curiosity, right? A growth mindset will allow you, whether you're in school or out of school, to continuously enable yourself to learn and really think of what's next. Find the right mentors, find the right coaches, think about what good looks like, what great looks like subsequently, right? And optimizing towards that. From a curiosity standpoint, once you know or want to know, right, what it takes to getting there, you'll get it.
So what motivates you to work hard and be curious and all of that?
Wow, what a good question, Roshni. On the one hand, I like to figure out really what's the best process for the team, what's the most efficient, most effective way to getting my entire team there together. Externally speaking though, the more curious you are about a client, and that really keeps me going on a daily basis, and you deploying your care and concern to the very clients that you're working with Google, right? The more you will see client success, and when clients succeed, they will befriend you and a relationship is fostered, right? And that's the second thing that keeps me going. And if you ask me, a third thing really is being able to scale that up, right? I deal with 50 clients at any one point in time. Fixing one or two is an okay deal, but it's not a biggest deal. If I can replicate that across 50, 60, 100 across Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, that is a much bigger deal. And that appreciation on both ends becomes so much more powerful.
Speaking of career and all these challenges and just knowing what you want, you've mentioned in an episode of the Seriously Casual podcast that you had a mentor when you were a university student. So how did that help you when you were in SMU?
Highly recommend. Alumni mentors to me are such important figures in my life, honestly, as an SMU student. With every mentorship experience, the discovery journey becomes something that is crucial to finding a win-win situation between your mentor and mentee. And to a large extent now, because I've benefited from it, I try to figure out how I can give back.
So you spoke about giving back to the SMU community, right? And you've also pledged your support to the SMU Alumni Infinity Fund, which provides financial assistance to SMU students in perpetuity. So thank you so much for contributing to this fund. What do you think of it?
Really, I think it's a good thing that SMU has come up with. Whoever thought of the idea, really, it's a brilliant idea. Right, I think in Chinese saying we have this thing called, right, where you band together really all the chopsticks together and it becomes harder to break. Right, and I think that's really what the SMU Infinity Fund is, right, where you really pull people together in really forming a bigger portfolio of funds to really make sure it becomes a perpetuity for the longer term. And that's a really good way to, if you ask me, give back. Right, I think it's something that the pioneers, or whoever that is on it, really will see not the benefit, not so much in their lifetime as much as it is for the future generations. And I'm personally a firm believer of really making sure the next generation succeeds. So because of that, yes, I'm totally for it.
Before we go, let's leave our audience with some words of wisdom from the one and only Flo Yeow. So what is one piece of advice that you can give to all SMU students?
I don't know if it's word of advice or wisdom. I don't know if I'm even wise to be deploying that. But if anything, beyond working hard, I think a lot of people can work hard. But if there's one advice, work smart. Really, if you think the world is the oyster, the world is much bigger than you think, right? So how do you work smart rather than hard? And I think that should be practiced or start practicing it when you're still in school. However you try to think about how smart you can work, start from school, right? Start from SMU, and then it will cascade in towards your work life as a muscle memory, and eventually it's something that you've been practicing and shouldn't be unfamiliar to you.
Okay, you heard that from Flo Yeow. Thank you so much for coming down, Flo. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I hope you enjoyed your time here.
Of course.
And with that, this is A Cuppa with the one and only Flo Yeow. Thank you for tuning in to this episode. Once again, I'm Roshni Idnani from SMUBE Campus Radio. Say what you want to say.